that most of the seniors in our club, we're not really sure what direction Tucson's going to be headed in. So we kind of wanted some questions answered. We have a lot to go over. Tucson, as most of you guys know, has the 9th highest sales tax rate in the United States. We also want to know, will the potholes ever get filled? Why don't we have Grand Canyon University as another option for education here? Our police department is currently understaffed by 78 officers. The national average is actually 2.5 officers per 1,000 people. Tucson is at 1.8. So that's another question. When will we get police fully staffed? And we also want to know, will we lose the A-10 and Davis-Monthan Air Force Base? So those are kind of our main questions, and it's important that we get these answered. And it's kind of also disappointing that we couldn't have the Democrats here to answer these questions for us also. But tonight, let's focus on our Republican candidates and hoping to make a change in the future and the leadership of Tucson. So we're going to start with opening statements. Ben Buehler-Garcia, he's running for Ward 3. And then Mike Polak, he's running for Ward 5. So I'll let them take it from there.
Thank you, ma'am. And thanks to all of you for being here tonight. My name is Ben Buehler-Garcia. I'm a candidate for City Council for Ward 3. I am running in Ward 3, but I'm running citywide to represent all the citizens of Tucson. I'm a 34-year resident of Tucson. All 34 of those years in Ward 3. In fact, the home that I bought in 1996 is literally about a block and a half from the first apartment I rented when I first moved to Tucson, University of Arizona. I have a degree in public administration from the University of Arizona. I spent 20 years in economic and community development. I take great pride that I've been involved in many major initiatives here in the city of Tucson. I was one of the founders of the group that renovated the historic Fox Tucson Theater downtown. When Tucson was looking at losing spring training, I put together a group of volunteers and experts to try and help save spring training. That evolved into what is now the Pima County Sports and Tourism Authority. I volunteer with over 30 organizations here in Tucson, everything from businesses for the last 9 years, I've been the volunteer executive director of a group called Stand Up for Kids. We go out in the streets and help the homeless teens and street kids, the most vulnerable homeless population. In 2009, I ran for city council because I was heartbroken. I was heartbroken at what I had seen happen to our city, and I continue to be. And now I guess I've kind of gone from being heartbroken to just plain old being angry. I know Tucson can do better. I don't think I have to tell you some of the issues we have here. I don't think I have to tell you. All you have to do is go outside and look around. Look at the streets. Look at how we've taken a very, very beautiful place and allowed it to become very ugly. Ward 3, and yeah, it's kind of interesting that the two candidates actually bothered to show up here tonight. In a city with the sixth highest poverty rate in the country, the two candidates that bothered to actually show up here tonight represent the two wards that are most afflicted with poverty. Ward 3 has got the highest domestic violence rate, we've got the highest property crime rate, we've got one of the lowest median incomes in the whole city, and 40% of the public housing, the subsidized housing in the entire city of Tucson is in Ward 3. I know we can do better, but before you can start on the path of fixing things, you've got to recognize what is wrong. And I propose to you that the incumbent has had 8 years to do the job, and it's not getting done. So I would like your vote. I want to remind you it is a citywide election. It's essential that every Tucsonan who lives in the city limits who can vote does vote in this election. Thank you.
All right, before I get started, because my opponent canceled at the last minute, we got another empty chair. That's about all he is. My name is Mike Polak, and I am running for Tucson City Council in Ward 5. Like Ben, we see the same things out there. The roads are down and damaged, they're not being fixed. But like you know, I want my family to have a good life here. I want them to prosper. I want our businesses to prosper, because our businesses here are the ones who produce and create and make things happen and sell their goods. They keep Tucson alive. And I see a lack of our production and manufacturing jobs. We don't have high-paying jobs here any longer. It's one of the things I'd like to bring back and work with. That's one of my goals. And my my history and work, I've been in the aerospace industry for over 20 years. I've got a degree in computer science. I also have a degree in electronic engineering. I've worked for the Boeing Company, Northrop, McDonnell Douglas, and Sea Launch Boeing, where we supported satellite launch missions. I've been around the world. I've worked with a lot of different cultures and people, which has given me a good understanding of how I have to do business with people from vast, diverse areas, I mean, in business. So I think we can do better for our city. I believe I can make some better decisions. And like Ben said, this is a citywide election, and we need to get the word out there and start making things happen. But I've been a resident here for 5 years. My mom lives here, so I've been coming out for more than 25. So I do have a history here in Tucson as well. Thank you.
So we are going to encourage questions from the audience, and then we'll let them speak also. So.
I've heard that Hughes is transferring some of their production to Alabama or South Carolina or someplace else. Have you heard anything about that?
Raytheon?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Raytheon. Yes, back in 2010, Raytheon wanted to expand here, and they were unable to expand.
Yeah.
And what they did is they bought property in Huntsville, Alabama, which is right down the street from the Boeing Company, because Boeing has a huge facility for their rocket manufacturing in Huntsville. Very big. And they have been sending people there on a regular basis. Just a few months ago, they hired over 100 people at Raytheon here and shipped them all off to Alabama. Even when you go on their site, most of the jobs there state that this job will be moved to Huntsville, Alabama in 2013. To me, that's writing on the wall. I don't know how stable that's going to be, because Raytheon in California and El Segundo is closed as well, because Raytheon has bought property there. And anytime a company starts shipping jobs out of town, that means they're reducing in size. I know they do have contracts for this facility that are coming up, but a lot of that has not been disclosed of how much is going to stay here. And I wish we knew that. But that's something we would have to get into with the economic development team once we get elected and get in there and find out what their true motives are.
Mr. Frember sent me a postcard, and he said he's created 1,100 jobs in Ward 5 alone. Where?
He hasn't created any jobs at all. Matter of fact, the city council doesn't create jobs. We have to create the environment, and they've chased more jobs out of town. Like GCU, that's one of the biggest ones. 2,400 construction jobs at $100 million in paid wages. And after that construction was done, that would have been about a 3 to 5 year build project. That's not a small deal. But the city council didn't look at the extending jobs to home manufacturing or building apartments for students. And that would have brought more revenue in. And then you have the loss of the 1,000 to 2,000 permanent jobs for the staff. That would have been a GCU. So we lost 4,400 jobs there. And then if you look at like the F-35, again, same thing. But in Ward 5, he's only created part-time minimum wage jobs, and most of the people that live in our neighborhoods are working 2 to 3 jobs just to survive because our hours have been cut. There's not very much going on here, and I don't see it. He's sent out a press release a while back, and that press release, I only counted maybe about 207 jobs that he created. That's much different, because everything that's on that postcard is the same thing that's on his website, toting about how he created those jobs. He didn't create those jobs. Walmart and Costco, those businesses were already in negotiation to come here back in 2006. So they were already planning on coming here before he was even in office.
Carolyn, if I could add to that, in 2005, the city of Tucson hired me to write a master economic development plan for that very neighborhood at Kilo 36. And one of the key recommendations to come out of that plan was the residents of that area did not have proper access to basic services like grocery shopping. So I wrote a plan that recommended, that needed a grocery store. It just so happened that grocery store that went in there was Walmart. And the city, Karen Ulick was the only council member to vote against that Walmart. Even though the council member of that area and the residents of that area wanted that business. You talk about probably almost half of the revenues that go into the city's general fund come from sales taxes. Your average Walmart, the Costco at Irvington at 19 that did not, or the Sam's Club, forgive me, that did not happen. That's 1.5 to $2 million there alone. So I wrote the plan, designed the plan, I recommended that it be built down there, and she voted against the Walmart in that corner.
Why doesn't she like Walmart?
My guess is because of the union issue. That's my guess. But the point is, you're elected to represent all of those in the city of Tucson. And I've used this line before, and I know you guys hate it, but I hate cheese Danish. But I'm not going to vote against a bakery just because I don't like cheese Danish. You're there to represent the citizens of Tucson, and when most of your revenue comes from sales taxes, yeah, we don't want to put 15 big box stores in Tucson, but there's $30 million in sales tax revenue. So you need to step outside of that and do what's best for all the residents of the city of Tucson.
I need to learn more about this, but I understand that on the same ballot, we're going to be voting for a city plan. Some kind of a,
Right, yeah, that's Plan Tucson.
yeah, there you go. What do you know about it, and
Well, it's really up to you. That's what I do. I do community and economic development planning. Any project that's going to work is going to work because of leadership in the community. And the general plan is supposed to provide a broad perspective of the overall goals that the city as a whole wants to reach. My concern about the general plan is that process fell prey to what has so often happened recently in Tucson. And that special interest went in there and started adding every little thing in there and this little thing. So instead of a broad general plan, we have kind of a broad general plan, but a lot of specifics related to this and nothing related to that. For example, the issue of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base and the $1.6 billion that provides to the local revenue every year was initially not addressed in the plan until folks stepped up and said, hey, if you're going to put that in there, you need to put this in there. So unfortunately, it's not the best product available, but it is going to be on the ballot. As a voter, you need to read it and decide which way you need to go.
I don't believe that it has the economic growth that we should have in there. It seemed like there was more restrictions in the plan than anything else, that it could hurt the city more than it would do good.
It's going to be a pretty vanilla election. That's why it's even more important for all of you to get out and cast your ballots. I got to tell you, I'm very concerned. I voted in the primary election. I'm one of those people that likes to go down and actually cast my ballot. It feels like I'm doing my job as an American. So 8 o'clock on election day, my girlfriend and I went down and cast our ballots in Ward 3. At 9:30 the next day, I received a voice message on my cell phone saying, you need to call us back by 5 o'clock. We can't verify your signature. If you don't call us back, your ballot won't count. Now, if you get beyond the fact that the guy who you're calling is the guy whose name is actually on the ballot, and the whole thing of Mr. Buehler-Garcia, did you vote for Ben Buehler-Garcia? But what concerned me was, I said, well, what signature the signature we have on record is from 1994. Well, my signature's probably changed. Imagine if you had a stroke. I mean, all of our signatures have changed since 1994. But I asked, what percentage of this, how often does this happen? She said probably about 2% of the ballots. Now, in 2009, there were 74,000 ballots cast in my race. You take 2% of that, I don't do math in public, but that's about 1,400 votes. I lost by 175 votes. I'll leave you to draw any conclusions.
I've got a question. Tell us about the potential of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base and the loss of the A-10.
Well, clearly the A-10 is, the aircraft itself is slated to be phased out eventually. Now, if it was up to me, if I was king for a day, I'd open up the lines and build more A-10s. They're one of the few tools that our defense department's ever designed that actually does what it's supposed to do. Having said that, again, as I mentioned, that's $1.6 billion a year. That's not just what happens on base, the construction. Well, we're having a hard time here in Tucson about the only construction that was taking place was out there on the base. They really lifted those jobs here in Tucson. You've got about 3,000 civilian jobs and another 4,000 direct jobs out in the community. So when you talk about a company, I think it's called Marston's, right there on Craycroft, just outside the front gate, all they do is sew patches and promotions on uniform. They've probably got 6 or 7 employees. That's a direct small business that's impacted by Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Davis-Monthan was on the first closure list. I was part of the team that designed the strategy that not only kept Davis-Monthan off the closure list, but identified other missions around the country of other bases that are going to be closed and said, hey, that'd be a good mission to bring to Tucson. That's how we got the 12th Air Force headquarters here in Tucson. Some of you may or may not know this, but the highest ranking officer in the entire state of Arizona lays his head out of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. He's in charge of 13 units in the U.S. and everything south of Mexico. That's a headquarters company responsible for 65,000 employees. So my concern is we rested on our laurels. We have not been aggressive enough in supporting that base, and that word has gotten back to Washington. And I believe of the 4 major bases in the state of Arizona, if the BRACs, or whatever you want to call them this time, come down the line, we are the weakest. And it's because we haven't had the leadership. I mean, ask the incumbent what position is on Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. I've been working out there to support those people for 25 years. She showed up last month for lunch.
Yeah, he's right. That base is essential. And being a Marine, I've seen those planes in action. That's one of the best combat infantry support aircraft that you can get that can fly in and do the job. We got to fight for that base, but he's right. The city council's leadership did not fight. They did not fight for the F-35. They didn't fight to support it. I mean, if that base closes, we have the potential to lose billions in revenue and thousands of jobs, and it will impact us. I have seen it firsthand. Being from California, I saw a naval base close with a naval hospital, and it devastated the city of Long Beach, and they're just now starting to recover after 20 plus years.
And you know, if I may, Mike, it goes even beyond that. The scary part is one of the advantages that Davis-Monthan has is AMARC. What some of you probably call the Bowling Yard, the Aircraft Maintenance Regeneration Center. It is highly unlikely they could find a place somewhere in the U.S. to plop down 4,000 planes. So the reality is, the worst case situation, they close DM, they've got to keep AMARC open and the support facilities open. Now, I've heard people say, oh, well, don't worry about it, they'll never close Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Well, tell that, ask the former mayor of Mesa what he or she thought about Williams Air Force Base. Now, at Williams, they've done a wonderful job of converting that base, but if they close Davis-Monthan, we won't have all those advantages because they'll have to remain that military mission out there to support AMARC. So we won't even have a clean slate to work with. The mayor and council of this city need to be aggressive and unequivocal in their support for that Air Force Base.
I'm all for saving a few bucks, but the mayor and council has been enacting resolutions with an emergency clause repeatedly and aggressively. This is in order to circumvent the rules so that they don't have to give public notice and public comment and so forth. But yet the people are not getting to provide their input on these resolutions because of the emergency clause and no public comment being allowed at the mayor and council meeting. The media seems not to care at all. It's been brought up. There was one op-ed in the Arizona Daily Star a couple of months from a woman complaining about it. If elected, what will you do to stop this practice? Because most of these resolutions aren't emergencies.
Yeah, the older folks in the crowd will recognize this phrase. It depends on what is. I guess it depends on what an emergency is. And Ken, I think that's one of those things that I don't disagree with you on. You know, sometimes in order, if it's something that is not what we would define as an emergency, but it's something that needs to move forward and get off the table so you move on, I can see the appropriateness of using that phraseology. I would want to take a hard look at, I still understand it. If it's something that requires public comment, there's still a public comment, or there should be at least a public hearing on it before you make that final vote and declare it an emergency. At the end of the day, is that one of those big things that if we don't put the emergency clause on there and let it go into effect 30 days, 45 days, whatever it needs to be? I don't see a big difference there. So in general, I would support just not adding that emergency clause unless it was truly an emergency. Or if it's something that had to be implemented, for example, you know, a resolution or some sort of action with Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, you could vote on it and let it actually take effect in 45 days, but it'd probably be good to actually have it take effect immediately.
And another thing on that too, when you do that, it's just putting a Band-Aid on a problem versus actually fixing it one time. And when you have issues, you want to take a look at it, make sure it's done right the first time. You don't want to have to keep addressing it over and over and over again. And that's kind of how they're getting away with that. And they just keep kicking the can down the road, and that's why we're in the problems we're having right now.
Can's been kicked down the road so much, it's in El Paso.
Yeah. So are the Padres now.
The can's causing the potholes.
Yeah.
The Tucson Padres are in El Paso now too.
I have a question. Did you still have a question?
It's a reference to what's going on now.
Have you ever heard of a group, and I love this name, forward Tucson,
Tucson forward.
Tucson forward.
Yes, ma'am.
It acts to me like it wants to go backwards. Because aren't they in favor of stopping everything and shutting everything down?
Ostensibly, their position is that they're reformed to resist the F-35 coming to train here in Tucson. Now, keep in mind, the F-35 mission was slated, or the mission that we're currently talking about was slated to go to the Air Guard, the 162nd National Air Guard at Tucson International Airport. So a lot of folks get confused about what's a DM mission and what's an Air Guard mission. So ostensibly, that is their mission. But if you get down in the weeds and talk to them, some of them really, all they want is to just shut down the Air Force Base. And I've got to tell you, my neighbor's association, I live 8 blocks north of the U of A, my home was built in 1930, and sometimes I go to my neighbor's association meetings, and there's residents that just stand up and say, those darn students, and that darn U of A. And you almost want to say, anybody who had their home in 1884, you get to complain. The rest of us knew what was there when we moved in. I actually appreciate the university being there when I moved in. And it's kind of the same thing with Davis-Montgomery Air Force Base. But again, with my experience, let me add one more caveat. Here's what I see happening. Eventually, if you have an Air Force base, more than likely, you have to have a flying mission. Now, that's going to show up on that video and maybe the newspaper. Let me clarify. I spent the last 6 months visiting other communities with Air Force bases and talking to their civilian groups to see what they're doing to support Davis-Montgomery. You don't necessarily have to have a flight mission to have an Air Force base. Having said that, the F-35 is slated to replace both the A-10 and the F-16 eventually. If we want a flying mission in an Air Force base, there will be F-35s more than likely over the skies of Tucson. We need to get over that and just work to do what we can do to fix it. My big fear is, what we were really in competition for was to be the training base for the F-35, and we lost that mission up to Luke Air Force Base. The 162nd is an Air National Guard unit. That's really technically a state unit. So it's, and their specialty is training our foreign partners. Eventually, most of our foreign partners, at least some of them, will be converted from F-16s to F-35s. My fear is eventually someone is going to say, wait a minute, we're training the F-35s at Luke. Our foreign partners are converted to F-35s, but they can't fly them in Tucson. And eventually, we might lose the 162nd and those jobs and that economic impact to Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix. Now, keep in mind, those are reservists. Those are citizen airmen. Those are people who live in our community full time. And those jobs might get lost to Luke Air Force Base somewhere down the line.
Hi, they want to work on the budget and phase out aircraft, and then after they do that, they want to spend $6 billion on combat helicopters. Have we ever needed helicopters in Tucson, combat helicopters? What's the idea of the budget in the first place?
Sure.
If they want to spend $6 billion after the budget cut?
Short answer is yes. Just within the last, I want to say 12 to 16 months, the sheriff's rescue helicopter went down on a mission up here in the Catalina Mountains. And the PJs, the pararescuemen from Davis-Montgomery Air Force Base from the 943rd had to be dispatched in a combat helicopter to rescue those folks that went down in that sheriff's department helicopter crash. So on occasion, the airmen out there, Davis-Montgomery Air Force Base, whether they're with the 943rd or the 55th with the rescue group, and ladies and gentlemen, these guys are the best there are. These are fabulous people. But on occasion, they do serve a civilian role. When I went to visit the unit at Moffett Airfield in San Jose several months ago, the commander was apologizing because he wanted to take me up in a helicopter, but it turns out that when I arrived, they were gearing up to deploy to help rescue missions at Hurricane Rita. And of course, I'm like, no, I get to actually see you guys do what you're doing. So yeah, they need the best equipment, because when a helicopter goes down, it doesn't go down in compartments. The whole thing goes down.
Yeah, well, it's an essential mission because the Border Patrol also and Customs sometimes will actually utilize the military out there to help them with surveillance as well and rescues for people out in the desert as well, for agents that get hurt. They've been out there too rescuing when their helo can't get out and they're down, so they utilize the PJs out there for the border as well.
Now, I want to be clear, when they go up on a mission like that, they're not armed. I mean,
They're
unarmed.
They're
It's
unarmed.
hard to say, don't think there's 50 calibers.
Well, the word combat is in there, you know, if it just said rescue, okay.
Your combat search and rescue.
Yeah, searching.
Search and rescue.
What can we do, we as individuals do to help support Davis-Montgomery and protect them from going? I know we can't count on our city council right now.
Yeah, we need
So
to
what
start
can we
showing
do?
up, the meetings, start yelling and screaming louder than the
At the
NIMBYs.
city council meetings or
Yeah,
where?
because when I've been to the city council meetings, and one of the things I see, the people that always get their way are the ones that are the not in my backyard, the anti-business, anti-growth people. And there's nobody there to support anything going on. When I went there for the liquor license for Walmart, when they had that board there was nobody there to support Walmart except Walmart. And everybody kept saying, oh, Walmart creates crime, and they create all this crime in the area, we don't want them here. And it's like, well, they don't realize that the Walmart's not creating the crime, it's the poverty rates and the lack of jobs here in Tucson. And I blame the city council for chasing businesses away. And they were holding up that liquor license, which held that store from opening, and then it also jobs. And it just snowballs. But as Tucson citizens, we got to come together and start saying, no, we need to change the way we do business. And we got to come together as a community to do that. Otherwise, it will never happen, and this town is going to be non-existent of jobs. It's going to be void of jobs except for part-time and minimum wage.
I second what Mike said. Let me expand on that a little bit. If you look over the past several years in Tucson, part of my frustration, part of my heartbreak, is because of the lack of courageous leadership. We have become a city where a couple dozen people can shut down any project. Grand Canyon University is not a perfect example, but it's a similar example. Tucson Forward is another example. I don't know how many total people are involved in Tucson Forward, but I'd be willing to bet it's far short of the list of supporters on the Minuteman website that supports the 167 million. So you need to write letters, you need to get engaged. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what this election is all about. We aren't talking about poverty, we're talking about potholes. We're talking about, as I mentioned before, we've taken a beautiful place and allowed it to get ugly. You as the voters need to step up and take your city back. I'm here because I care about the community. I'm running for city council. Mike is here because he cares about the community, so he's running for city council. Karen and Richard are paid. This is their job to be here tonight, and they're not here. You need to spread that message to your friends and neighbors. Look at this strictly as an employee relationship. It's been 8 years in the case of Karen. Is the job getting done? And I would propose to you it's not.
It's not getting done.
Joe Miller, Midvale Park. Why are your wards that you're running for so stricken with poverty? It seems like the boundaries of your wards are where the poverty is getting worse all the time. Why is that?
Well, I'll tell you mine. First off, I got one statistic here, and you guys are just going to hit the floor. Your jaw's going to drop to the floor. The number of children that are eligible for our free and reduced school lunches right now is 85% in Ward 5. 85%, and that's up through 2012. That's embarrassing. Same thing with the public assistance. 23% of the population in Ward 5 are on public assistance and food stamps. And then the child poverty rate is at 42%, and just overall poverty for the ward is 31%. And if you look at all of Tucson, it's 26%. I mean, we should be embarrassed as a city. But I blame that on the city council. Richard Fimbres has been anti-business, anti-growth, anti-taxpayer. They have pushed jobs out of town. They have chased jobs out. El Parador is open for 40 years. They've closed. I have never seen so many small businesses close in the last 4 years. It's abysmal. But that has to do with the fees, the regulations. It puts these people out of business. So people that have small businesses can't afford the fees that the city charges. They can't afford to deal with the regulations, so they close. So these people have nothing else to go on. So they're forced to go into that, having to get the assistance, because there's no jobs for them. So between Grand Canyon University and even Rosemont Copper, I mean, people need these jobs. They need them. And they don't care about the citizens of Tucson. They only care about their seat.
By the way, restaurant El Mesón de Cobre, which is in Ward 3, closed. I think you saw the papers today. And El Mesón de Cobre. How's that? Restaurant's been, I think, 40 years. But right in Ward 3, another one. And to amplify, let me rephrase a little bit what Mike said. The blame lay with all of us in this room. Yeah, the mayor and council haven't made, honestly, I don't know, sometimes it's bad decisions, but more often than not, it's not making any decision. And, one of the things I've learned from spending so much time with the military is a lot of times you've got to make a decision. It may not be the right one, But if you don't make a decision, people can die. Now, we're not in that situation here in Tucson, but really, the sixth poorest city in the country, we've got a top 10 research university here. You know, a critical part of the Mars lander mission, it wasn't run out of Florida or Houston, it was run out of the U of A, right there. There's a country 50 miles south of us that does $400 billion in trade with us every year. And we're not taking advantage of that. When I was running international trade programs for the Tucson Chamber of Commerce, we were recognized as the best international trade program in the entire state. So it's lack of courage, it's lack of good decision making, it's lack of experience and attitude. And just to follow up on one thing Mike said, Grand Canyon University, and you'll get debates about whether they're going to come here or not. As an economic development professional with 20 years of experience, I have spent time in boardrooms with CEOs trying to recruit companies to Tucson. And I will tell you, the backside of that is what really concerns me. Obviously, I would have loved to have Grand Canyon University. But the backside of that is CEOs and site selectors around the country, when they're looking to go to a city, they read the papers too, and they read just what Mike was saying. Here you've got Rosemont Copper, a company that has met or exceeded all the rules. The only company in Southern Arizona that is committed to replace 105% of the water they pump out. Let me say that again, the only company that's doing that. Good jobs, 2,000 jobs averaging $60,000 a year, and Karen Ulick in 2007, before anything was known about the mine, before their plan of operations, what their mitigation was, any of that stuff, led the charge in opposition to the mine. And that is still on record. People see that. They see Grand Canyon University. They see that a couple folks have shut a project down, and even scarier with that, and this is not the city council, this is us Tucsonans. But when someone submits a freedom of information request to get details of negotiations that really should be kept quiet. Imagine, I was involved when Raytheon was consolidating out of Western Cucamonga and bringing those jobs here in Tucson. Imagine if the word had gotten out in Southern California to those plants and those communities that Raytheon was moving those jobs here before Raytheon was ready for that word to get out. It would have hurt us. And that's our problem. We've become the city that can't get things done. It's this lack of experience, it's lack of leadership, and it's lack of creativity. And trust. We have got the tools here to make Tucson better. We're not a Detroit. We don't have to Detroit. That die has not been cast. But it's going to take people with experience and, like I said, courage to get it done. And every once in a while, you're going to have a vote that, or you're going to have to make a decision that might cost you votes. But you got to make that decision. And if you don't get elected, fine, you don't get elected, but the roads will get fixed. Short answer to your question about how we get the roads fixed, we have an election every year. Because if you noticed, once we're election, the roads start getting fixed. You know, if you notice in 2009, 30 days before the election, the mayor and council all got together and declared themselves business friendly. You want to know what not business friendly is? Not business friendly is my client who goes out there and builds the pad for his houses and gets an 1.5-inch line approved. Pours the pad, puts the plumbing in. Inspector comes out and says, look, that should be a 2-inch line. But you approved an 1.5-inch line. I'm the inspector, fix it, or I'm going to shut you down. Okay, digs up the pad, replaces it with a 2-inch line. Next inspector comes along. Why do you have a 2-inch line in the ground when the plan we approved for you says 1.5 inches? Well, because the lad said, I don't care. You take it out and you meet the plan. Tear it out and start over. That costs money. That costs time. The Twitter-thon that I got a little bit of flack about because one of the business people on there is Joe Higgins. Well, yes, Joe Higgins has strong opinions. He has a radio show. But guess what? Joe Higgins is a very successful entrepreneur. He has one business on Ward 3. He's closing down because he keeps getting burglarized. His trucks keep getting vandalized, and they keep ripping off his business. He's shut it down. Those people are out of work. He's got a second business that's extremely successful. So successful, he has to expand it. He's not going to expand in the city of Tucson. He's going to expand in Oro Valley. Because he knows in Oro Valley that if he calls a cop's going to be able to show up. He knows in Oro Valley his employees are going to hit a pothole that's going to cost him $1,400. It's attitude. Attitude. Don't get me started.
Gentlemen, I know that this is a citywide election. However, can you briefly tell us what your boundaries are in your ward's physical boundaries?
Yeah, my boundaries actually run all the way down Valencia, up through Benson Highway. They kind of jog around the military base, up to 22nd and Swan, down about 12th and 6th Street, and then back down to Valencia.
Mine ballpark are the River Road or the city limits on the north, on over west to I-10, a little bit west of I-10, kind of Columbus on the east, and for practical purposes, Speedway on the south. So central, north central Tucson.
Good evening. My name is Zacharias Katsaros. Thanks for coming out here and talking to coming out and talking to the voters. I guess I have 3 questions essentially, and I'll be succinct. First one is specifically, what would you do from a business perspective? What initiatives to attract businesses here? Anything with licensing, things of that nature. My second question is, what industry would you seek out to bring to Tucson? I'm thinking along the lines more than just like bringing QTs here and so forth, but deep businesses like Oro Valley has done.
I'm sorry, bring what here?
Deep businesses like headquarters, like Honeywell and so forth, Ventana Medical, along those things, where they employ project managers, 6-figure incomes. And then the third question is, do you favor for city employees 401ks or pensions? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, on the perspective on the prospective businesses, one of the things we have to do is reduce our fees here. A lot of businesses are not able to renovate their properties because of the high fees. Look at, they closed Furs on Oracle, and they had another potential build. It was going to be a super Furs, and they didn't build that either because the fees were so high. They were like into the $200,000 range. So Furs just closed up and said, see you later, they were done. So we need to reduce our fees, reduce our regulations to get these businesses started. We need to work closer with the businesses in our community to find out what's needed to be done. Also, we need to get the businesses to trust us, and we need to get the outside businesses to trust us and possibly offer incentives to get them here. And I believe that, like, one of the platforms I've been running on is that I would like to work out a plan where we could possibly find a way to increase our aerospace industry here. How do we get more production and more manufacturing here? Because long-term manufacturing production jobs are what's needed to stabilize a big city like this. Small businesses are great, but you need the higher paying jobs in here to sustain the small businesses. Without that, everything rolls downhill. Eventually, you're not going to have anything if you don't get those bigger businesses. Right, like the headquarters, Boeing moved from Seattle, Washington to Chicago because they made them a great deal.
Yeah.
We need to do the same type of thing here. What can we do to get your business here, and what is it going to take? And we, as a city councilman, we need to go there with an economic development team and say, here's the package. Here's what we have to offer you. We want your business here. We want your trust. And that's how we have to go about doing that. As far as 401ks, yeah, 401ks is a good way to go. While I was working with Boeing, one of the things they did with us is they discontinued, they let us put into a 401k, but our pension plans were put on hold. So they weren't putting anything else into a pension plan. Everything was put into a 401k, and they increased our amounts we could put in, like from 20% to 25% of our paycheck every 2 weeks. So you control your own destiny, and at some point, if you have something to retire on, it's because you were the one who chose to do it. You're not relying on somebody else. You're making your own choice to take care of yourself, and I think that's what it's about.
About unfunded liabilities on what we own now.
I'll try and address that first, and unfortunately, this is what I do for a living, so I'll try not to get too far down the weeds. From the 30,000-foot level, I believe that over the next 4 years during my term on city council member, to be honest with you, I really believe that our reputation nationally has been damaged so badly that we won't have a lot of luck recruiting new business in Tucson. I think that's just the reality. Should we not keep trying? Absolutely. And I get frustrated at kind of that zero-sum game discussion that always takes place. Well, we've got to have small businesses or large business. You can have both. Cities that are winners have both. Cities that are winners don't say, oh, Grand Canyon University was never going to come here, and by the way, if a council member doesn't want it, then the rest of us just kind of roll over and play it dead. That's not what winning cities do. So from the 30,000-foot level, we need to take care of what we've got here and at least stop the bleeding. Make sure we keep Raytheon here and growing. Make sure the small businesses can remain healthy and continue growing. Exploit, and I use that word advisory, exploit the resources that we've got going for us. The U of A, tourism, the mine. We're surrounded, we produce, 70% of the copper in the entire United States is produced out of Southern Arizona. It can be done correctly, and I believe Rosemont is actually going to set a brand new standard to do that. But beyond that, with the technology that Rosemont is using, with its training site that Caterpillar's got south of Tucson, with the expanding of the mining and the copper operations throughout Arizona, with one of the best copper engineering mining engineering schools in the entire city, here in Arizona. I believe, my vision is you push for beyond that, we become the world headquarters for training and technology when it comes to mining. If you want to build a mine anywhere in the world, you've got to send that person here to Tucson, train up, and we start building the economy that way. So that's number one. But mainly, now getting down into some specifics, the example I gave you with my client, I would really push for a portfolio management system down developmental services. My bank does it, my car dealer does it. When I start a conversation, that same person walks me through the process. Assign that inspector to maintain the process. That's an easy fix. In 2009, I proposed some language for something I call the Safe Harbor Ordinance, and I've seen this in other cities where I work. When you do a major transportation plan like we've got with the RTA along Grand Road or Broadway, those commercial properties along there, because they're unsure, and stability is the main thing a lot of businesses are looking for, because they're unsure what's going to happen. If that tenant moves out or something happens with that building, a lot of times it will remain vacant because the next business doesn't want to move in there because they don't know what's going to happen. It might be a change of use. There's all these sort of things they have to go through. They're not going to make that investment without being able to maintain the property for years. What a safe harbor ordinance would do would be in those transportation corridors, basically would say, you know, for lack of, and this is a very Reader's Digest version, but unless it's health and safety related, if you move into that business, you can maintain it the way it is and continue making money and paying taxes until we actually do a taking to fix your, take your business.
TUSD has closed so many schools. What are, is there anything you can do for the schools? And I'm sure we spend a lot of money on maintenance.
Let me, if you would, let me finish, because that's related to what I'm saying, so let me finish this. So I proposed that in 2009, after the election, Karen said, that's a good idea, let me push it. It disappeared. It died quietly. Well, guess what? We're 30 days from election. Guess what's coming up again? The Safe Harbor Ordinance. Coming back to the 401k, as far as the industries, I think, as I mentioned before, I think we really do have an advantage in the U of A, and we should focus on those industries. Logistics. Logistics shows the highest potential growth rate for new jobs in the entire country, with an average salary of $70,000 a year. We're 50 miles from an international board that needs logistics. We should be focusing on that, supporting it. Coming down to your last question, the pension thing is not going to be on the budget, it looks like. They're not going to make it in time. But the big picture I ask is, why now, for a third time, do the voters have to step up and try and put something on the budget because the mayor and council weren't doing their job? The pension fund this time. Last year it was the bonds to fix the roads. In 2009 it was Prop 200, which might not have been the best proposal in the world, but the citizens were standing up saying, look, you guys aren't doing your job, so we're going to put on the ballot to try and do the job for you, and that's no way to run a government. You need folks down there willing to make a decision and do a job. So then coming back to your question, as city council members, we've got absolutely nothing to do with Tucson Unified School District. Having said that, what we can do is create a healthy environment where you don't have 45% of the kids whose parents only have one job going to school hungry, because we do have good jobs and a healthy environment and a healthy tax base that then helps the schools. As a city council member, I've got nothing to say about TUSD.
What about the unused buildings? Do you have nothing to say about that?
Well, the final decision with TUSD, what I'd like to see, in fact, in Jefferson Park where I live, they did close that school, and I'd love to see that school converted either to a higher-end residential project. There's a school just down the street from me that was converted, I want to say in the 1980s, to an apartment complex, and they did a wonderful job. They maintained the historic integrity of the building. It is being used rather than being vacant. So, as city council members, if that's something that, we don't acquire that property, and we don't have the money. The city's broke. Until we get more business in there and start driving more revenue, I don't know where that money's going to come from. We need to focus on the basics. Public safety, police and fire, roads and parks. Getting back to the basics. You got to eat your peas and carrots before you have dessert.
Hi, I'm just wondering, earlier you mentioned the mine, the Rose Copper Mine, and I'd like to know where you think that we stand in getting that mine brought here.
Well,
And
you go ahead, I'll back.
Well, one of the problems I see right now, I know they're still working on their final processes, but the city council is still holding up the vote on the water connection for Sahuarita. Sahuarita's on the hook for the water, not Tucson. There should be no reason why the city of Tucson should hold up another 2,000 jobs. That's how our leadership is. They do not want jobs here. It's obvious. When they hold up something that small to hire that many people, they don't care. It's obvious.
Just in interest of complete openness, Rosamond Copper has been a client of mine for 38 months. I've been blessed in that for 16 years I've been self-employed, and I've never been the kind of guy that takes a client I have philosophical differences with. I'm pretty good at what I do, but if I don't like where you want to go or the direction you want to take it, hire somebody else. I'm not your guy. I spent 4 hours, 1 hour each with each of the top leadership people at Rosamond Copper before I decided to take this job, precisely because I want to be convinced myself that they really are going to do it differently, that they really were committed to making this a state-of-the-art, a different mine than what our grandfathers saw. So I've worked with them for the last 38 months, helping to train small business people to take those jobs as subcontractors, working with the workforce development agencies to make sure we've got workforces prepared to take those jobs. And just this morning, I'm also helping on the logistics plan for the mine. The average, in general in the mining industry, the average job with a high school diploma is $60,000 a year. The average salary with a college diploma is $100,000 a year. Rosamond's going to bring in 450 of those jobs to Southern Arizona. Now, I smile when you ask the question because sometimes when we do tours, people say, well, why can't you put the mine somewhere else? Well, because you kind of sort of have to mine the ore where it is. That's a simple question. But again, I look beyond that now. I believe, well, I don't believe, the Forest Service, and they're the controlling agency for this, they made it very clear from day one on the public hearings that the no alternative alternative was not an alternative. The option of not building the mine, the Forest Service does not have the authority to stop this mine. It's just a question of what they want Rosamond to do and what the plan will look like. So I believe that the mine will happen. I believe it will be one of the best mines, well, the best mine in North America. I believe those are good jobs. I believe they're actually committed to the process. I've seen it happen. I've worked with them to hold their feet to the fire to make it happen. But you as a young person, you need to think about that. The director of the College of Engineering or Mining Engineering said because the gold is down worldwide, they're expecting 90% of their graduates that graduate this year to actually stay in Southern Arizona and work in copper mines rather than leaving town to work in gold mines. That's a good industry. Those are jobs with benefits. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, some of our best doctors and lawyers and teachers in Tucson are there because someone previous in their generation used their back in a mine so that their kids could use their brain. The middle class in Southern Arizona was built on the mining industry. We should not shun it. We should not shun it. And the last message I saw from Karen Ulick talked about the mine becoming, that experts agree that it's going to be a toxic waste dump. There are 500 studies on this mine. They're all online. You can look at them. There is no evidence. There is no reputable scientist that would support that claim. That mine is in a lime-based formation. You know what is lime? It's a tungsten. That water will be perfectly pH balanced with the water around it. That's what the science says. So it's just a shame that as citizens we've got leaders who say those kinds of things. To the best of my knowledge, she's never toured the mine. She's never received a grade on the mine. Short answer to your question is yes.
And I've been on the mine tour myself too, and yeah, they've done a lot to make things right. I mean, it looks really good from an engineering standpoint.
Well, they jumped through every hoop they could possibly jump through. I mean, it's beyond me that it hasn't opened yet.
Coming back to Mike's point, their parent company is investing $20 million. This is cash. This is money that's going in the ground right now to extend that CAP connection down to Sahuarita so the community water company in Green Valley can start taking advantage of their allocation of CAP water, which they haven't been able to draw down because you can't get there from here. And that's part of the decision that Mike's talking about with the mayor and council. The mine is not beholden to comply with the dark skies ordinance. And coming back to your question about industries, wow, optics and the related industries, we've got it going here in Tucson. I think we're the second highest concentration of those sorts of things on the planet. We should be developing that. So I support the dark skies ordinance. Rosemont was not beholden. That by law, they don't have to comply with that ordinance. They're doing so voluntarily. And by using technology, they are actually not only meeting the standards, but exceeding the standards. And I believe that some of the other mines are looking at how Rosemont is using the focused LED technology to convert their mines as well. They're doing that because they want to be good neighbors.
Okay, so there's 50 to 60 people in this room who now know this. When Ronstadt left Tucson because she bought a house in the line with the Air Force Base, my grandson in California knew about it, okay? The whole country knew about it. So 50 or 60 people here know this. why don't we find a Ronstadt, who's big name, big mouth, and talks up Tucson's what it means. See, this is, first of all, I can't vote for you, because I'm in their opinion, okay? But I wanted to know what was going on. I get the newspapers, I read all the news I can, I even listen to the radio news, but I don't know any of this. It doesn't matter that I can't vote for you personally. It only matters that nobody else knows this either. So the message that we know that the newspaper is liberal, not liberal, but it's beyond. But this message doesn't come out. So I always think you're unfair because they get their news out in the newspaper. No, I'm serious.
No.
I don't want that. That's not what I
won't.
want. But I mean, if my grandson in Eureka, California, Northern California, he's 30-some years old, knew about, what is her name, Linda? Is it? Linda Ronstadt. She carried on awful because she bought a house, and like you said, you know where you're buying. I mean, it was really dumb. And she left here constantly complaining about the noise, the this, the that, she wanted to get rid of the bass and all this nonsense. Does anyone here remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, where's our Republican man?
We need to fight, we need to stand up and fight, and that's one of the things I've been telling people is that I'm not afraid to stand up to the small groups and say, we don't want this, and I'll make noise,
Well,
and
where's
if I
your
have,
big mouth? I mean, where's our star?
what we
Who's
do,
gonna-
we start talking to people, we're the big mouths, the community, we have to get together and start voicing our opinions, and it has to be made public, like I'm a city
You know
councilman.
how Americans are impressed with stars. Where's our star?
We don't need stars, we're the stars, you're the stars, you're the Tucson citizens. Yeah, I
And we
mean,
need someone who can.
She wants Ronald Reagan.
I didn't vote for him, I was a Democrat then.
I understand what you're saying, but let me suggest this. You do what you can with what you got, and I'm sorry, we're all you got right now. But
You gotta work with what you got.
everybody can do something. You don't have to live in Tucson to love Tucson, okay? There's people who don't live in Tucson who are investing in my campaign because you know what, they've got 900 employees that live in Tucson and they care about them. They're paying sales taxes in Tucson, they care about them. They're thinking about where to locate their business, and one business person told me, I'm putting in 2 new stores this year. About 1 million population in Tucson, I want to access the market, but the city's going to charge me an alarm fee ordinance in case my alarm doesn't go off, and when it does go off, the cops can't come anyway. They're shut off. So he's putting his businesses across the line in the county, still accessing Tucson market, we lose that revenue. So what can you do? You can't vote for us, but you can tell your friends to. You can make a
yeah,
contribution.
and then
You
we're
can write
also
to
your
that.
voice as well, I mean, because a lot of the decisions that the city council makes ends up affecting everybody in the county. It affects people on the reservations. People want jobs. So, I mean, we have to start coming together as a community, bottom line, from all areas. And we got to start speaking up about this because, like I said, those things that come into Tucson, it affects the job market, it affects everybody. And we can't stand for
But
that
other
anymore.
than Lauren, I don't know too many people who are known well enough to embarrass the city council into doing what they should have done already.
I'm not here to embarrass the city council. Look at the data, okay? That's
Oh,
all
I
you
know.
have to do.
I
Tell
mean,
your
I
neighbors,
do.
tell your neighbors to step outside and look around. Is this the city they want for themselves and their family? ¿Qué quieres por tu pueblo? What do you want for my town? What do you want for our town? When I'm standing on the doorstep, whether it's been a Democrat or an independent or Republican, I ask that question. Are you happy with the city of Tucson? And I think I've only had one person who said, yeah. I ran away from that house real quick. But in most cases, regardless of their party registration, said, no, we can do better. Yes, we can do better, but you've got to get up and vote. Now, I also had one person who agreed with everything I said, was looking at my palm card, said, yep, you're right, yep, you're right, yep, I like your idea, yep, you're good. Wait, are you Republican? Yes, I am. Well, then I can't vote for you. Okay, you know, that's the way the game is played, I get it. But there needs to be more people who care about this community and care about putting it on the right track without stars, just guys that want to go to work. than there aren't. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a low turnout election. A lot of folks are going to get that ballot in the mail October 18th, and they're probably going to be inclined just to check a box whether it's a D or an R. And you need to get to them, you need to communicate with them, whether it's calling a radio show or writing a letter to the editor, and ask them honestly, look around. Is this the city you want? If not, it's time to make a change. It doesn't have to be any more complex than that, I don't think.
The neighbors and the businesses around Broadway, from downtown to Country Club, don't like the expansion plans that the Regional Transportation Authority now has for the, that stretch of Broadway. 8 lanes, bus lanes, sidewalk, blah, blah, blah. What do you think should be the future of that corridor?
I think it's worth examining. In this case, I agree with Steve Kozachik. And I don't quote me on these figures, Jim, but there's at least a couple hundred businesses along there. I worked briefly for the Main Street program, consulting with some of those businesses. So there's a few businesses along there that are going to be hurt by this. I'm not convinced that the traffic volumes are going to necessitate that kind of construction just yet. I'd be interested in looking at other options for that, particularly for the Broadway corridor.
What would you like to see then?
Well, you know, you can actually improve traffic flow. And I'm not a traffic engineer, I'm just a common sense kind of guy, but I fought forest fires for 3 summers. I know a little bit about hydraulics. And there's just, I parallel the movement of water to the movement of cars. Cars move in cohorts, okay? It takes a while for the cohort to start up again and get through that intersection. I believe by just improving the intersections to allow for more cars to pass through that intersection on a minute-by-minute basis, you can improve the traffic flow along the streets. I'm a huge fan of more bus pullouts. I can't tell you how many times I've been stuck in the right hand. For $70,000, we could get that bus out of the way. Certainly, we need to look at public transportation. I tell you, one of the things I'm very concerned about, this issue came up with the sidewalks and the bonds and how, whoops, we didn't think about that. And by the way, folks need to lose their jobs. I mean, on occasion, if you're in transportation planning and you, whoops, forget about the federal transit rules on sidewalks, when you do, I mean, that's a pretty big whoops. Having said that, the other day, I see people, I live on Park Avenue, I see people in wheelchairs trying to make their way in traffic because there's no sidewalks. We need to take some serious looks at bicycles and the bike lanes and the sidewalks. I talk about potholes all the time. You know, if you're a bicyclist and drive down Park Avenue in the bike lane, a major transportation corridor to the University of Arizona, there's no sidewalk, but you can't ride on the bike anyway. But in the bike lane, there's a pothole that takes up the whole lane. Your options are sidewalk, ticket, cars, death. Okay? So fixing the streets is not just for people that drive cars. I got off the subject there, but look at the intersections, bus pullouts.
Okay.
But we've got to have money to do any of it.
They took money from the roads to give to the sidewalk.
They're going to be required under this bond election. The way it was originally sold was, it's just going to be curb to curb, because that's what we really need. No landscaping, no sidewalks, okay, yay. Well, it turns out that the federal rules do require you, when you make major transportation infrastructure improvements, you're required to make improvements to the sidewalk, to the pedestrian options as well. Like I said, that's a big whoops. Now, how much of that $20 million per year that we're spending is going to be taken out for that? I don't know. But the bigger picture is, why do we continue to settle for mediocrity in Tucson? The legislature started sweeping the HERF funds. Okay, I don't like it, but that's what they did. That's the reality. The city of Mesa diversified their funding for street maintenance. There are less than 50% coming from HERF funds now. The city of Phoenix did the same thing. Our city just kind of grumbled and gnashed their teeth. In 2011, you know how much we spent out of the general fund to fix our roads in the city of Tucson? $0. Not a dime out of the general fund to fix roads.
But they built a trolley.
Well,
And we're gonna pay $4,000 or $7,000 a year for, guys.
I guess that's why I come back to priorities, and this comes back to this gentleman's question. Business people aren't, yes, taxes and regulations, those all make a difference, but they want to live and work and have their employees live and work and do business in a city that's clean, in a city that's functional. And that does mean roads, and it does mean police, and it does mean good schools, and it does mean a clean environment. Too often, with this, the best thing the city can do for business is take care of their own business, and that hasn't been taken care of.
We have time for one more question, and then we're going to go to closing statements. So.
Yes, I have a comment and also one question for both of you. When you were talking about Davis Motham earlier, Ben?
Yes, sir.
I believe that Allie Miller this afternoon mentioned that the Air Force actually started a boneyard up in Utah
Yeah, she was on the radio this
on
afternoon.
J.T. Harris. So
I was not aware of that, but that's kind of scary. It's
Yeah.
very scary.
Very, very scary.
the question that I have is, what are your feelings or your stand on working with Mexico for a deep water port to have Tucson basically as a distribution point to create jobs not only here but also south of the border?
You're the logistics expert.
Well, yeah, I've got a good background in logistics, and I'll tell you, after my time of dealing with overseas import-export, I think that's a really good deal, working with Mexico on that, because not only is that deep water port going to send up thousands of containers here, but we can also utilize the port in Ensenada as well. Because what happens is, when the Port of LA is over, they're overburdened or they're on strike, they divert all their traffic down to Mexico. And all that traffic needs to come somewhere. So if they bring that up through Tucson, and we have an inland port here that can manage all that, that's a lot of jobs. And you're talking higher paying jobs too. And I believe that we could do that, but the thing is we need to get our infrastructure in place for that. Right now we don't have the infrastructure built in place. Like I said, I was in Port of Long Beach with Sea Launch, and they're still trying to get their infrastructure in place with roads. They have to build 2 new bridges in LA now because they never expected the kind of traffic they have. So we have to look at this, and I've talked to people that are experts in this too, saying that yeah, it's a 10 to 15 year project to actually get the railhead set up. To reinforce the road, you need at least 3 lanes going each way, north and south. And you need your hub. You're going to need a flat land that can store and stack containers 4 high, and we can do it. It's feasible, but we got to start working on the program now. Everybody keeps talking about it, but when are we actually going to start this plan? When are we going to do it? And I think that's one of the things that we can work with with the economic development team here in Tucson to maybe push that along. And we'll be prosperous again. That would bring back a lot of work here.
It does come back to vision and leadership. We've been talking about the Canamex corridor now for over 2 decades. While we've been talking about it, other communities and regions have been doing something about it. Just in the last month, there was some city, I don't know, white spot in the road, Texas, I don't know who they were. They were actually over here talking about international trade and how they've got better border access from Mexico, and they should be the access point for Mexico, and companies who want to do business with Mexico should be moving to their city. They're in our town, our backyard doing that. I grew up in Mexico. My folks are missionaries, and I spent a lot of time up in the jungles, and down there, pyramids and stuff are like tin cans. They're everywhere. And I just remember thinking a lot of those things that they built, most of the people involved in building those knew they would never see it completed, but they built it anyway. Okay? Now is the time. The best time to plant trees was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. Now is the time to get going on that. I'm encouraged that the mayor, the new mayor, has recognized that. I'm encouraged that we do have an international trade specialist in the economic development department now. But that's something where we all need to pull together, and you got to hammer it all day long. And all 4 years of your term on the city council, you can't just go away and disappear for 3.5 years and then come back and talk about business friendly and international trade, and I support the Air Force Base. That's not going to cut it. Look, folks, I know the job pays part-time. I've been self-employed for 16 years. I'm in the process right now of converting what I do for a living such that I can serve the voters as much as possible full-time. It's not full-time pay, but the voters deserve full-time service, and they deserve full-time respect. I'm not getting, $24,000 isn't a lot, but that's what you get paid to be at the Bear Canyon Library for Wednesday night.
It's a full-time job.
I have been scheduling the libraries and our speakers for the Eastside Republican Club. I am fortunate enough to have Lori Oyen help me. A few years ago, she started the Sabino Teenage Republican Group, and they have had one candidate forum, an election cycle, so it's pretty much every year that these young people step up, work to get youth here, set up the room. So I think we are in good shape having young people like the Sabino Teenage Republicans. I think we should give those young people a round of applause. I think we're very lucky to have 2 outstanding got some yard signs. If you'd like to take some of Mike's handouts, Ben's cards, pass them to your friends who live in the city or you think might live in the city, or go to your church or synagogue and talk up the city election so that it's not such a low turnout. And then for those of you that like what you heard today, next month we will be, the Eastside Republicans will be at the Golf Links Library, and we will be hearing from Yale Wisnick regarding the fair tax. And then in November, the third Wednesday in November, we'll be at the Golf Links Library again, and we will hear Supervisor Ray Carroll talk about the condition of the county. So thank you for your time. What we usually do is pick up the chairs and stack them. We have some rollouts here, put some along the walls. Feel free to mingle, talk to our candidates, and at 8 o'clock the librarians will flip the switch and we all have to leave.